Have you ever imagined how a single act of betrayal could shake the entire Roman Republic and change the fate of the world? In this video, we will unveil the dark secret of the Roman civil wars that erupted after Julius Caesar's assassination, sparking intense conflicts and risky alliances. If you're tired of shallow stories that fail to explain why these struggles truly destroyed Rome's stability, get ready. The truth behind these battles goes far beyond simple military clashes. Today, you'll discover how Octavian's rise, Mark Antony's maneuvers, and Cleopatra's surprising role led to the fall of the Republic and the emergence of centralized power. Stay with us to understand every detail and finally get a clear picture of how all of this still impacts our world today. But before we dive into this astonishing story, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos packed with fascinating historical insights about ancient Rome. Now let's begin by understanding how Caesar's death paved the way for the rise of new leaders and plunged the Republic into war. The spark: Julius Caesar's death. Julius Caesar's death in 44 BC was not just a simple assassination. It symbolized an unprecedented crisis. Many senators feared he would become king, dismantling the Republic's traditions. So, when the final blow was struck, they believed they were saving Rome from tyranny. However, the only certainty that followed was chaos, which would dominate the streets and halls of power. In the midst of the turmoil, countless questions arose. Who would inherit Caesar's legacy? His will named the young Octavian as his adopted son and legitimate heir, catching many by surprise. Up until then, Mark Antony, Caesar's general and close friend, seemed like the leading figure to fill the power vacuum. What no one imagined was that this seemingly inexperienced boy would cause a political earthquake, forming his own legions and garnering support from the veteran ranks of the late dictator. While the Senate desperately tried to avoid further conflicts, Mark Antony maneuvered to seize control of Rome, and Octavian took his first steps in politics. Thus, the Republic now had not just one, but multiple contenders for the informal throne left by Caesar. Tensions grew, and it soon became evident that words would be replaced by swords. Now, let's see how Octavian used Caesar's inheritance to take his first step toward consolidating power. The rise of Octavian as heir. Just weeks after Caesar's assassination, Octavian emerged from obscurity in a surprising way. Despite not being old enough to hold high-ranking political offices, he used every coin and the fame of Caesar's name to legitimize his actions. Upon arriving in the Italian peninsula, he recruited veterans loyal to the fallen general, guaranteeing them rewards that Julius Caesar himself had promised. This swift move secured Octavian something essential: the loyalty of the legions. If there was one lesson Rome learned the hard way, it was that whoever controlled the armies controlled the Republic's fate. It didn't take long for Mark Antony to realize the threat this ambitious young man posed, especially with a will that officially recognized him as the heir to 2/3 of Caesar's wealth. With power in hand and a bold stance, Octavian quickly caught the attention of influential senators who feared Mark Antony's ultimate rise. The stage was set for a clash of titans. Are you enjoying this story? Give this video a like now so we can keep bringing you impactful stories like this one. And if you think Octavian had an easy path, let's now see how Mark Antony fought back, pressuring the Senate and taking on this new threat. The inevitable tension with Mark Antony. Mark Antony was one of Caesar's closest allies, having witnessed firsthand the power and influence that legions could wield. Naturally, he didn't accept Octavian's rise without resistance. Antony had the prestige of an experienced general and the support of a segment of the Senate, which still doubted the young heir. Furthermore, he used the emotional impact of Caesar's funeral to gain popular sympathy. On the other hand, the Senate saw Mark Antony as a potentially problematic figure. When he tried to manipulate laws to remain in power, senators began to see him as the new Caesar they so greatly feared. Many started encouraging Octavian to oppose him, even while officially advocating for moderation. This created a dangerous polarization. On one side, Mark Antony, charismatic and seasoned in military affairs. On the other, Octavian, bolstered by Caesar's moral and financial inheritance, supported by popular demand, and part of the Senate. A confrontation was only a matter of time. Now, let's uncover how Octavian and Mark Antony, instead of destroying each other, joined forces to forge an unexpected alliance. The Second Triumvirate, a union of convenience. Just when conflict seemed inevitable, the figure of Lepidus, another of Caesar's former allies, emerged. He proposed a solution to contain the chaos, a power-sharing agreement. Thus, the Second Triumvirate was born, bringing together Octavian, Mark Antony, and Lepidus under a kind of three-headed dictatorship, legalized by the Senate in an attempt to restore stability. However, the alliance, which initially seemed beneficial to Rome, quickly revealed its violent nature. The triumvirs created proscription lists, targeting and executing political rivals to seize their assets. Many senators and other authorities were mercilessly hunted, spreading terror. Despite his youth, Octavian played an active role in these purges, tarnishing his reputation but significantly increasing his financial and military power. Despite the triumvirate's strength, its balance was fragile. Any misstep could dissolve the alliance into internal battles. Amid this tense climate, a new target emerged: the conspirators who had assassinated Caesar, still alive and regrouping in the east, ready to challenge those attempting to control Rome. Now let's see how the triumvirs turned their swords against those who spilled the first blood, Caesar's assassins. Settling scores with Brutus and Cassius. Brutus and Cassius, celebrated by some as the saviors of the Republic, had taken refuge in Greece. They joined forces and assembled a considerable army, supported by eastern provinces opposed to the new regime. The decisive confrontation came at the battles of Philippi, where Mark Antony and Octavian led their legions to face the conspirators head-on. The battles were brutal. Commanded by a still inexperienced but determined Octavian and the seasoned Mark Antony, the Roman armies clashed in fierce hand-to-hand combat. Brutus and Cassius, after seeing their troops outmatched, chose suicide, tragically ending the chapter of Caesar's assassins. With Philippi, the triumvirate could finally celebrate its victory against the last remnants of the most radical Republican faction. However, eliminating an external enemy is far easier than resolving internal disputes. The victory brought a wave of changes in the division of territories and sowed even greater rivalries. Have you ever wondered how this event shaped the fate of an empire? Leave your comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Now let's explore how the apparent peace after Philippi didn't last and why tensions among the triumvirs only grew stronger. New divisions and the beginning of rivalries. Victorious, the three Roman leaders divided the territories. Octavian took control of the west, Antony ruled the eastern provinces, and Lepidus was left with parts of North Africa. However, governing this vast expanse was far from simple. Thousands of war veterans demanded land and payments. To honor these promises, Octavian had to confiscate properties from Italian families, creating a snowball of discontent that would spark regional revolts. While Octavian struggled to contain unrest in the Italian peninsula, Mark Antony enjoyed the luxuries and opportunities of Egypt alongside Cleopatra. The idea of a Roman general becoming so deeply involved with a foreign queen raised doubts and stung the pride of the Roman elite, especially since Antony was still married to Octavia, Octavian's sister. The fragile balance of the Triumvirate teetered on the edge of collapse. Lepidus, increasingly isolated, attempted to expand his powers without much success. Meanwhile, Octavian began to see Antony as a rival who could consolidate power in the east. At this point, many pieces were in motion, including the emerging figure of Sextus Pompey, the son of Caesar's former adversary, Pompey the Great. Speaking of threats, let's dive into the story of Sextus Pompey, the man who blocked Rome's supply lines and forced the Triumvirate to act. The challenge of Sextus Pompey. Sextus Pompey had established a stronghold in Sicily and Sardinia, controlling crucial supply routes. His fleets blocked the arrival of grain to Italy, causing widespread famine across various regions. Octavian was forced to negotiate, ceding territories to weaken the blockade. However, this provisional agreement didn't last long. Mark Antony also attempted to use Sextus Pompey as a bargaining chip against Octavian, understanding the importance of keeping the Roman people fed. During this period, Octavian resorted to strategic marriages and alliances to buy time and secure support. The ultimate solution came when Octavian and Mark Antony temporarily set aside their differences and worked together to crush Sextus Pompey's naval defenses. With the help of strategist Marcus Agrippa, Octavian strengthened his fleets and, after intense battles, defeated Pompey, who fled and was ultimately killed shortly afterward. Enjoying this trip through time? Then share this video with your friends and help us bring even more historical content. With Sextus Pompey out of the picture, let's see how Octavian began dealing with other issues, including the Third Triumvirate. The fall of Lepidus and Octavian's rise. With the threat of Sextus Pompey eliminated, Octavian turned his attention to undermining Lepidus, who now controlled only Africa. In a tense episode, Lepidus attempted to claim Sicily and was accused of inciting rebellion. In a decisive move, Octavian convinced Lepidus's legions to abandon him, effectively removing his former ally from the political stage and confining him to a life of near isolation. Now, the Triumvirate was no longer three. Only Octavian and Mark Antony remained. While Antony maintained control over the East and deepened his ties with Cleopatra, Octavian solidified his influence in the West, bolstering the loyalty of the Senate and the legions. His reputation grew, built on both ruthless actions and promises of order. At this stage, Octavian frequently delivered speeches portraying Antony as a traitor to Roman values, particularly due to his intense relationship with Cleopatra and apparent neglect of the Italian peninsula. This atmosphere of distrust engulfed Rome, setting the stage for an ultimate confrontation. Let's now explore how Antony and Cleopatra became the greatest obstacles to Octavian's ambitions, leading to the clash that would transform Rome forever. Mark Antony, Cleopatra, and the final polarization. For many Romans, Antony seemed to be heading toward becoming a new Eastern monarch, an unforgivable offense to those who valued the Republic. His official union with Cleopatra, while ignoring his Roman wife, was a severe misstep in the eyes of traditionalists. Octavian seized every detail of their relationship, portraying Antony as a man who prioritized a foreign queen's interests over Rome's well-being. Meanwhile, Cleopatra, sovereign of Egypt, had clear goals, maintaining her kingdom's influence and securing power for her children. Aligning with Antony gave her access to Roman armies and a powerful ally against regional threats. Antony, in turn, saw Egypt not only as a strategic fortress, but also as a reservoir of wealth and grain to sustain his legions. Octavian, at the height of his political prowess, managed to have the Senate declare war, not directly on Antony, but on Cleopatra. This placed Antony in the uncomfortable position of choosing between Rome and the Egyptian queen. His decision to side with Cleopatra made him the target of fury in the West, giving Octavian the support he needed to muster a massive army for a decisive victory. We've reached a critical juncture. Discover how the most famous naval battle of the era sealed the fates of Antony and Cleopatra at the hands of Octavian. The Battle of Actium. In 31 BC, the two forces clashed off the coast of Actium in western Greece. On one side, Antony and Cleopatra commanded large fleets, though with less experienced sailors. On the other, Octavian relied on the military genius of Marcus Agrippa, who implemented effective naval siege strategies, cutting off supplies and wearing down the enemy's morale. The battle itself was intense, filled with daring naval maneuvers. However, the turning point came when Cleopatra, fearing total defeat, withdrew with part of the fleet. Antony, torn between pursuing the enemy and his desperate need to protect the queen, also retreated, abandoning many of his ships to their fate. This retreat severely compromised Antony's position. Octavian triumphed at Actium, gaining even greater prestige and clearing the path to pursue the couple to Egypt. Did you already know this intriguing detail about Actium? Share your thoughts in the comments on this decisive retreat. Now, let's explore the dramatic conclusion to Antony and Cleopatra's story as Octavian arrives at the gates of Alexandria. The fall of Antony and Cleopatra. After Actium, Antony and Cleopatra sought refuge in Alexandria, attempting to organize one last stand. However, the morale of their troops was shattered, and many legions saw no point in continuing to fight against Octavian, especially without proper pay and with defeat all but certain. In 30 BC, Octavian advanced with his legions and besieged the Egyptian capital. Isolated, Antony and Cleopatra realized their end was near. Upon receiving the false news of Cleopatra's suicide, Antony attempted to take his own life. Gravely wounded, he lived long enough to reunite with her and die in her arms. Cleopatra, in turn, refused to be paraded as a trophy in Rome and made the fatal decision to end her own life, allegedly by the bite of a venomous snake. With the deaths of the couple, Octavian annexed Egypt into Roman territories and eliminated the last major source of resistance. This marked the final act in the long struggle against his rivals, paving the way for a new era in Roman history. To conclude this saga, let's uncover how Octavian turned his total victory into a government project that forever changed Rome. Octavian becomes Augustus, the birth of the empire. Returning to Rome in triumph, Octavian was hailed as a hero. However, instead of proclaiming himself dictator, he adopted a subtle strategy. In 27 BC, he announced his resignation from all extraordinary powers and returned control of the state to the Senate. This gesture shocked many, but was exactly what he needed to be hailed as Augustus, receiving even greater powers, now legitimized by the Senate. This symbolic act marked the birth of the Roman Empire. Octavian became Augustus, Rome's first emperor, though he officially presented himself as princeps or first citizen. His rule ushered in a long period of relative stability, known as the Pax Romana, but at the cost of concentrating power in the hands of a single individual, something unthinkable just a short time earlier. Thus ended the era of the Roman civil wars, giving way to a new phase in which the Senate's role became much more limited. Octavian ultimately fulfilled Caesar's vision, a strong, centralized power ensuring Rome's greatness and security, but leaving behind a trail of betrayals, executions, and memorable battles that forever marked history. The post-Caesar civil wars were both destructive and transformative. They symbolized the end of the Republic, but paved the way for an empire whose borders and influence would extend for centuries. All of this was made possible through the power plays of figures like Octavian, Mark Antony, Cleopatra, and many others, who, driven by personal motives, profoundly altered the course of Western civilization. If you enjoyed this journey through time and want more fascinating stories, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this video with your friends. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story about ancient Rome and the Empire.